Good day, viewers. Thank you for joining us at the Command Center in the studio of the National Television Network, NTN. I'm also going to welcome you to join us to the program Agriculture on the Move. I am Philip Sidney, your host. The topic today surrounds the impact of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector. If we have time, we will give you an update on other programs in the Department of Agriculture. Without further ado, let me introduce my guests. To my immediate right is our Permanent Secretary in the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources and Cooperatives, Mr. Barry Felicia. Next to him is Dr. Oria King-Snack, who is our newly appointed Director of Agricultural Services. And of course, I wish you well, madam, in your endeavor, and I know you'll do a good job.
Thank you. Next
to her is Mr. Kemuel Jabatis, who is the Chief Extension Officer, and they are all from the same Department of Agriculture. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce, you are the first batsman. And of course, let's give us an overview of the impact of COVID on the agricultural sector.
Thank you, Mr. Sidney. Permit me to tell my viewers that I wish them to be safe and COVID-free during this period. In terms of our Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources and Cooperatives, the impact has been profound. Insight into our budget, our planning before COVID, we had some major projects on the way. We had Tropical Bontic project, which has no financing at this time. We have our National Diagnostic Facility, where we wanted to implement a new phase, and that is not possible at this time. We had our 7 crops project, production scheduling, that has impacted our production scheduling on the 7 crop project. Sargassum seaweed, last year we engaged on cleanup of beaches, Casaba, Dennery, Meekwood. We bought some monitoring equipment, and that has been impacted as well, Sargassum project. In addition to that, Mr. Sidney, the impact on the sector has been profound, as I indicated. When we look at the statistics, agriculture revenues on a monthly basis, revenues accrue to an amount of about $500,000, a little over that. And that means that the farmers and the fishers, those who provide the produce to the hotel industry, that revenue has not been coming in. So it has impacted the industry and the income of farmers. Overall, the main concern for everybody in all the subsectors, agro-processing, fishers, livestock farmers, crop farmers, they all say one thing: they want market access. They want to sell the produce, and it has impacted their revenue, the income stream. And that is the main concern for a lot of those persons. The secondary concern for them is that of inputs. When we saw the impact of COVID, we saw that there was the closure of certain shops and suppliers. They were not sure how they would continue to provide the inputs for their crops, inputs for the animals, the animal feed. That was bearing heavily on their mind. Also the closure of the curfew, the implementation of the curfew and the 24-hour curfew. You saw that we had to restrict labor to 2 persons on a vehicle. So the labor inputs into production was not forthcoming. So the impact, as I said, has been profound. It has been widespread. So we had to sort of curtail a lot of our projects in the Department of Agriculture, our major projects and plans, and the impact on the industry. We are trying to see how we can recover from that. But everything is not doom and gloom. We have certain projects in the pipeline that has been approved in the 2020-2021 estimates. So we have the $7.2 million COVID response plan. We also have the adaptation project, which I think Mr. Kemuel Jabatis can speak to, which has been approved in this year to help agriculture as well. It has a sustainable and environment focus, but we will be utilizing it under the Department of Agriculture.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. P.S. Kemuel, prior to COVID, I'm sure you and your staff had crop scheduling already geared to the hotels were still open, the supermarkets were still open. So I know there were plans in taking into consideration the fruit and vegetable import subsistence project, which you call the 7 Crops project. Before we get into that, tell St. Lucia, what is the 7 Crops project? Where was that seed sown?
Thank you, Sydney, and thank you, St. Lucia, for having us in your homes. The 7 Crops project is essentially started with Minister Ezekiel coming in and wanting to do something different. So recognizing that we had certain crops that the farmers were able to produce well, our food import being what it was, we identify out of the whole gamut of fruits and vegetables, a few, 7 of them very specifically, that farmers are producing. And for most of them, the importation figures were close to 1 million or over 1 million, for example, cabbages and the lettuce. So the decision was taken to step up the quantities of those these crops being produced. And we engaged the Taiwanese technical mission, who agreed to provide some financial support. So the mission, again, let's say thanks to the mission for supporting it. And we set off to provide support in terms of looking at the correlation between the hotel markets, the existing supermarkets, and part of the process here was to strengthen the marketing board as well. And so that was set in motion. We have had several meetings with those agencies, the hotels and so on. We've engaged the farmers. We started a scheduling process looking at what's going to go in the ground, what we need based on time series data in terms of the imports and local purchases. But here came this particular pandemic, and it offset the schedule essentially. Some persons might have noticed an abundance of certain fruits, the cantaloupe, honeydews, and watermelon just around the shutdown time, and just a couple of weeks after, an abundance of tomatoes. That happened essentially because we lost a part of the market, which was the hotel market. And so this particular project was geared towards reducing the importation on these specific crops. It sort of kind of modeled what we want to do with the other crops, but we had to start somewhere because we can't do it for everything. How has COVID impacted it? It has offset the market availability in terms of visitors and so on, but also keep in mind that what was established in January, February emerged at the time when we shut down. So you might have seen a little bit of an oversupply. While I'm speaking, might I say to St. Lucia, you might have read a couple articles that said the Ministry of Agriculture has advised farmers to cut back production. That is not the case. That has never been the case. What we have actually advised farmers in this environment is to pay attention to the quantities being established at any given time, recognizing that perhaps about 40% of the absorption at the hotels no longer exists. We want farmers to maintain consistency. We are not very sure what the importation will look like. And so the message here is regulate the production quantities, so plant smaller quantities more frequently, depending on the crop, to ensure that we have consistency of supply of these particular products. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. King, I know when the closure of the curfew and the closure of the hotels and of course the shutdown of the country, we wanted to know what was on ground. An assessment was done. Could you give us an idea of what did this assessment reveal as far as crops and livestock is concerned?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sidney, for having me here today, and thank you for Solutions for having me in your homes as well. On the onset of COVID and the fact that we found that it was getting a little closer to St. Lucia, we realized that, things had to be done. We had to start looking at our food and nutrition security. And when I say food and nutrition security, I'm not only speaking about availability of food, but availability and access to nutritious food. So on the onset of the curfew, the 24-hour curfew, what we endeavored upon was to do a rapid assessment as to what was on ground. So how would we be able to sustain ourselves in the event that the borders will close completely and we would not be able to import our products? So how would we be able to feed our solutions? So an assessment was done. It was conducted on the crops, looking at the fruits and vegetables, the 7 crops that Mr. Chabatis mentioned, and other crops that we would have normally produced. It gave us the assurance that we were able to be secure, at least for the next 6 months, yes, from what was on ground. Okay. We also assessed the livestock subsector. We looked and see what was present on ground in terms of animals, the weights that were available, the ages, and also what was in storage. For example, poultry, processed poultry, how much was in storage, how long it would have lasted us. We assessed the inputs in terms of feed, because we do have a feed mill present on the island, and we wanted to make sure that they would be able to maintain feeding the animals that are on ground, and to assure that the raw materials which are imported were available. So the assessment that was done indicated to us that it was not much of a problem at the time, at least for the next 6 months. Also, we did some assessments based on I think we did a 5 to 10 year trend in terms of our data for import, exports, and local consumption from our corporate planning unit, to get an idea of what our demand would be around this time of the year. And given that information, plus what was on ground, we were able to, it was able to help us put our things in motion as to how we're going to plan for the way forward. So it was an intense assessment. Again, it was challenged because we had a 24-hour curfew. We had to have our officers out there. And given the fact that, we had to respect the social distancing and all those protocols, so it did take a long time to get all the information in, but it was able to allow us to assess the situation and see where we were at. So for now, it appears that we are secure.
Great. Sounds good. So, Kimball, moving forward,
yes,
post-COVID, I'm sure, there's a plan in terms of crop production scheduling.
Yes.
We are also looking at with the hotels probably opening pretty soon. Okay. Are you planning with that in mind to find out exactly what percentage of hotels occupancy is going to be, also our own local consumption? All
right. So, if I backtrack just a little bit, the day of the shutdown, which came suddenly, we had farmers who had loads ready to go to the market, and thanks to the marketing board and the minister, he gave very clear directions that the marketing board should absorb it. Like you mentioned earlier, the biggest challenge for the department and our clientele, the farmers, is getting access to markets. We've worked feverishly with the marketing board as one of those options, trying to stabilize the operations in there. The massy stores, again, let's say hats off to them for doing what they do really well. They've been purchasing, they've been facilitating the purchasing of fresh produce. Let me also say saludos to our farmers. During this 24-hour shutdown, farmers found a creative way to set up Facebook pages, they set up WhatsApp accounts, and these guys were advertising what they had, and homeowners or consumers were able to message and say, listen, I need such and such, and farmers were able to actually package those and to distribute to them. So it allowed the emergence of something that we had not really seen prior to the pandemic. And so we need to salute the farmers who were able to go out there and do that as well. We also saw a few other hucksters come around, and they were able to pick up from different farmers and distribute. Now that the pandemic is here and our original schedules have gone awry, what we have actually sought to do is, again, we continue the data collection that Dr. King mentioned a while ago. So perhaps every 2-3 weeks, every 3 weeks, or perhaps once a month, what we try to do is to get a sense as to what is happening on ground. And it's a little challenging for us, and I'll tell you why. We anticipate that the borders will be open to visitors, but we don't know when. Now, the challenge for us is, if and when that happens, how are we going to prepare? Because we would need at least a 6-week window of opportunity or knowledge to know in the next 6 weeks that's going to happen. Because outside of that, none of the crops that we are actually cultivating will be ready within any time space less than 3 weeks, with the exception of lettuce, of course. So all these fruits will require at least 6 to 8 weeks, and in some cases 12 weeks. So we are challenged. However, we are interacting with farmers who are not going to hold the ministry accountable in case the proposed markets do not open. So we have been advising those persons who are willing and able to cultivate those crops, keeping in mind that these opportunities may present themselves in the next 2-3 months, depending on how the borders open. We recognize it will be limited, and so I must say that the officers are actually working with some farmers, select farmers. What we do not want to do is to engage people who are going to hold us accountable for having established certain crops. The time comes in, the number of consumers that we anticipate on island do not show up, and we cannot provide outlets for them. This is where perhaps later on Dr. King is going to mention the opportunity presents itself perhaps for export markets. Yes. We see what St. Vincent is doing, but that's a historical relationship. So maybe the opportunity presents itself if that is the case for export markets. For example, the plantain, one of our farmers who had an established 8 acres of plantain for export, it became locally consumed. And so some of us might have seen the increase on the local market. All that is being said, understanding that as a ministry, we are encouraging farmers to continue the cultivation, albeit on a reduced quantity in terms of the amount that is being established at any given time, but bearing in mind we're projecting to open up the country gradually. We do not want anyone to be losing out on opportunities, but at the same time we do not want to overproduce the market. The volumes increase, market forces kick in, and everybody begins to complain about the ability to distribute. Let me give you a quick example for some people who may know. We have a couple of farmers during this tomato fiesta in the last 3 weeks who only were able to harvest only 50% of the crop. The rest of it just went back to the compost heap.
Wow.
And that's significant. So we don't want repeats of that sort of action. So that's why we're asking the farmers to kind of work with the farmers, work with the market, We have the masses, we have the marketing boards and others to determine what demands are being brought about and use this as our target in terms of acreage for these crops.
I know we'll be talking about agro-processing.
Yes.
However, I mean, was that information passed on to the agro-processors to take in the tomatoes so that they can do some processing?
The challenge for us is we've been net importers of that particular product, tomatoes. And our agro-processors, we do not have, with the exception of 1 or 2 expats, some of the Italians and so on, who preserve some of those, we do not necessarily have any major actions in terms of pulping this produce and so on. So that itself speaks to perhaps future actions, but in this COVID-19, we did not have any agro-processor outside of a few persons doing preserves who are able to absorb some of that produce. But it is one of those lessons learned, which we may talk about in terms of preparing ourselves when these opportunities present themselves.
Thank you, Kemwell. Thank you. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. We're due for our first break. Stay tuned.
COVID-19 is a new pandemic disease as declared by the World Health Organization. It is transmitted directly by respiratory droplets when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or indirectly through rubbing the face with contaminated hands. There is still no specific treatment or vaccine against COVID-19, and as such, the farming community should adhere to some special recommendations. Ensure that farm clothing and gear is clean. Wash hands thoroughly before harvesting crops. Use face masks and head ties whilst harvesting, cleaning, and packaging crops. Use all safety precautions when transporting crops to the markets and depots, such as handling crates and crops with only clean hands and covering sneezes and coughs with a tissue or the inner arm to ensure body fluids or droplets don't get on produce, and washing hands or using hand sanitizer after using the tissue. More than ever before, your important role as gatekeepers of St. Lucia's nutritional, health and food security should be taken seriously. When you exercise these precautions, you not only safeguard your health, but also continue to allow all St. Lucians access to freshly grown fruits, vegetables and other local crops. Remember, it is our responsibility to ensure our nation eats fresh, St. Lucia's best.
Welcome back to the program, Agriculture on the Move. We've been talking about markets, and I think that stands out. But then we need also to look at how are we going to facilitate marketing. We know Massey is doing a pretty good job. We also know that you have the hucksters out there in the fresh markets. They're also doing a pretty good job in selling of the produce to St. Lucians. But where is the new marketing entity? I don't want to go back to marketing board. I may tell you, every time you mention marketing board to the farmers, it's in bad taste. They don't like to hear marketing board of the history. So I'm sure they are happy to know there is a new entity coming on stream. So Mr. Pierce, tell us about this new entity, where it's at this juncture.
Thank you, Mr. Sidney. Market access, marketing entity, that all came out strongly during the impact and showing the impact of COVID. So the Department of Agriculture, we've been restructuring that old SLMB, St. Lucia Marketing Board, into an entity that will be able to transform agriculture, to link production to actual market and demand. That is what we have been doing over the past year. We have been doing so by working on a business plan that entails a new vision for the marketing board. And within that new vision, we foresee a strong export strategy, strong import strategy, and emphasis on wholesale and retail operations at the marketing entity. We have now commenced the construction of a pack house, and I say that the pack house is almost completed. It's missing a few elements. We're missing some elements in the pack house to complete it fully and finish it fully. But once completed, that pack house will position that market entity in the market so it can regain some of that notoriety that it lost during those previous years. The pack house provides additional advantages in that pack house, you would get a testing facility, a small laboratory for the produce when it comes in, so that there is the food safety component. Mm-hmm. When it comes in, that produce can be tested and then passed on to the consumer. So that is the added element there, that food safety and advantage that the pack house provides to the marketing board. In addition, that pack house provides to the marketing board and to consumers as well the traceability, the element of traceability, so that traceability will be inputted in the medium to long term. So if there is something that happens lower down the supply chain on the consumer side, we can go back and see where it occurred and go back to the farm and remedy it. Mm-hmm. Traceability, again, is an advantage for the pack house and the marketing board. There is the advantage of the central hub that the pack house provides, in that if you go one-on-one to any hotel facility, you receive maybe 15, 20 farmers, and it is administratively burdensome for the hotel. You can relieve, the pack house and marketing board can relieve that administrative burden, and their staff can be deployed to do something. The accounting sections, they don't have to write 50 checks. The time for farmers to pay, which doesn't have to be 30 days, the marketing entity now pays persons within 2 weeks. So that's an advantage. The pack house also will be HACCP certified, and HACCP is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points, which is an international standard for food safety handling and processing. Definitely. So we have all these benefits to the pack house, which will now position that new entity to take advantage of its relationship between the farmers in the field, the supermarkets, hotels, and consumers at the end. So we are positioning that marketing entity to take up some of that slack. And in practicality, during this COVID period, we saw the marketing board taking up and position itself to achieve that responsibility and take up that role.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? I know it may be bothersome. Will the new entity be given the latitude to import, solely import? In other words, if, say, the hotel wants 1,000 pounds of cabbage, and when, of course, you look on ground, you can only get 500 pounds. Will they be given that latitude to import for that hotel, or given that hotel to import their own?
But it is a relationship that has to be nurtured. For the hotel for us to say to a hotel that you cannot import, there must be a strong reason why, whether we can bring it in cheaper. We are not in any way want to restrict trade. Mm-hmm. We want to ensure that there is healthy competition in the sector to ensure that prices remain stable and prices remain low. So the marketing board, when they look at the import strategy, will decide on the products that they can compete with favorably and profitably, and then engage in that particular sector. I don't believe that we want to provide an environment of protectionism for solely the marketing board in this trade environment.
Going forward, PS, I have heard it's all over on the media, in watering holes. What is there for the farmer and the fishers as it relates to the stimulus package? Okay. Could you clearly and let people stop me and ask me questions?
Okay. So in the package, as we mentioned, there's a 7.2 allocation under the capital project allocation for the Department of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. What we did to ensure that we were aligned to to the requests and the desires and the needs of the various subsectors, we had a stakeholder meeting and consultation with them. So, for example, Fisheries said clearly what we want, what we need now. We need our fuel rebate. We want it processed. We want it now. We want the radios for safety. We want to ensure that we have access to our facilities. Before curfew time, there were some teething issues there with the police and marine unit, and the protocols were established, and we ironed that out. So persons like Agro Processors, they said, what we want is a place to vend, and we want raw materials. The farmers, the crop farmers said, what we really want, we want fertilizer, we want inputs. Livestock farmers said, we need animal feed, we need industry support. So now that we know exactly what our stakeholders are looking for, we are now tailoring that package to ensure that we suit it suits their requirements, that we meet their expectations. So this is what we're doing with the 7.2 million, preparing, budgeting, and rolling out.
But you don't know how soon that will be rolled out. Okay,
so the budget for that comes with the passage of the appropriation bill. So spending takes place after that legislative process has taken place.
Okay, great.
But I must add that when we look at the quantities on ground, for example, if we look at the banana industry and we look at the fertilizer on ground, it is really at this point, we don't have enough fertilizer to supply everybody. If we look at the 7 crop projects and we look at the fertilizer, the inventory there, we don't have enough fertilizer now to supply everybody. So you may see a little delay because it has to come in. It has to be ordered, paid for, and come in.
Right.
So there may be a little delay in the response to getting everybody all what they need.
Okay, great. Okay. Moving forward, there are certain activities that the farmer requires. I know we are in the dry season, he would need irrigation water. I also know that he would need land preparation. So Dr. King, when it comes to land preparation, I know there is a facility to assist farmers with the tractors and of course the small implements. Moving forward and to ensure and to work closely with the 7 Crops project, how is this working? Is it working fluently?
Well, the services have never stopped. The services are still there and they're still available. What we're asking farmers to do is to coordinate. So speak with your extension officer so we could coordinate the mobilization of the equipment, for example, in one area, as opposed to having one farmer from this area and another farmer from another area. Good. So if a group of farmers from a particular area needs that service, it will facilitate or it'll make it a lot easier to mobilize the services so that it can be addressed in that particular area on that particular day. Okay. So we're asking farmers the service is still there, you can request of it, and we're also asking that they reach out to the extension officer so that they could advise them as to when and how soon they will be able to get that service. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we're in the dry season, and of course, moving forward in terms of production scheduling might be a bit rough. And I was told that though the rainy season or the hurricane season is close by, but the way this dry season is biting in, it seems to be in for a long haul. What's the situation when it comes to irrigation to the farmers?
I'm really glad that you're raising that issue, because just this past week I did some touring, the Grace to Saltibus Ridge and also the Marquis Babuno area as well. Some parts of Black Bay View Fort, and it's appalling to see the situation that is arising there. Let me say to St. Lucian water users, particularly those persons who are tapping into the surface water, you do not have the right to dam the river.
That's right.
It is against the law to walk into the river and to block the water flow that hinders the downstream flow. And we visited a couple of the waterways, and it's a matter of time because these periods are becoming more intense. And so as a matter of policy, we will need to sit as administrators and look at the overall situation. And it starts with managing the watersheds. We've had a number of projects looking at watershed management. So we'll have to scale up these projects and to ensure that we go back into these watersheds to safeguard the headwaters. Over time, from the last 30 years or so, the base flow in the rivers have reduced over the years, and it's now becoming a trickle in some cases. I have pictures from my staff. A number of tributaries have dried up. What does that mean for the agriculture sector? It means that we now need to change our attitudes towards usage and storage of water. Right now, our production depends on rain-fed and also surface irrigation, meaning we pump from streams, rivers, and ponds as may be available. One of the challenges to our current irrigation scheme is most of our larger producers are using overhead sprinklers. And we want to say categorically that the ministry over the years has made huge investments in demonstrating the value of using drip irrigation systems. And we will continue to advocate for farmers to use drip irrigation systems. If we do not move away from these overheads, it's only a matter of time till the same thing that has happened in countries in Africa, where you have huge conflicts over the use of water. And as some people might have known, the 6-day war that you hear of was a war over water. We may find ourselves with our farmers warring against their own family members to ensure that we have sufficient water. So moving forward, the ministry has historically provided support in terms of getting access to reduced price irrigation equipment. We will continue to provide that support in terms of drip irrigation and so on. And we implore farmers to see the value in it. We've had several projects. So moving forward, we want to encourage farmers to move away from overhead sprinklers and begin to use drip irrigation system. What it will allow is reduce costs on fuel for the pumps. It will allow a larger number of farmers to use the meager water resources that we currently have in our waterways. In some countries, the decision has to be made sometimes whether we continue to produce food or keep our people with water in their homes. And I saw a situation at Mount Aso, if you know where the dam is at Mount Aso. When the Wasco intake was taking up that water on Wednesday, there was no outflow. That is dangerous for the health of our rivers. And so nationally, we need to sit down and engage all the stakeholders to ensure that we understand the regulations for abstraction of water and ensuring that the river life continues. Having said that, we would like to encourage farmers to begin to look at small investments in appropriate irrigation systems. Under the BAM, for example, Sydney, we procured over 120 tanks, 1,000-gallon tanks. We need to ensure that we go back out there and ensure that these facilities are actually being utilized to store water so that the farmer could have access to water when the dry season ensues. We anticipate that there's going to be a shift come the month of June. We're not sure. These are normally forecasts. If there is a shift, I could tell you that everybody will soon forget the dry season. But if there isn't a shift, lessons learned, we now need to begin to map a pathway as a department as to how we're going to engage these communities to ensure that we have auxiliary water supplies, to ensure that production and productivity is sustained.
But do you think that there is a bigger picture in terms of land use, where a lot of our agricultural lands are moving into housing and industry? So in fact, just recently, last week, somebody called and said that they noticed a lot of fire in some of the forest areas.
Yes.
And what it looked to me is that farmers are moving into those areas and clearing those lands close to watersheds, and they're affecting, of course, the natural flow of water.
Yeah. You're touching on a very sensitive area, and I might want to tread it cautiously. When our coastal lands move into other kinds of developments, housing, industry, and so on, what it does, it forces the pioneers, who are the farmers, to move into areas that are closer to your watersheds or closer to your headwaters. As those areas are cultivated, the farmers themselves move up and take residence. For a person looking at saltibus and millet and forestier and some of these inland communities, these were actually pioneers, agriculturists farmers who went in there, and the developments followed. As a country in 2020, we now need to sit down, Department of Agriculture, physical planning, and our highest level of policy making for us to agree policies to safeguard the watershed, to safeguard the sort of developments that take place in critical areas. Look at Viewfort, for example, dating way back, being called the New Frontier, and all the plans that we have. The Viewfort watershed is a very unstable watershed in terms of the amount of clearing that has taken place. And so we now have to establish and agree policies to protect those. And you're absolutely right. It's a bigger conversation than just the small farmer. Fortunately, forestry has been doing a great job, although sometimes these sort of projects take a little time for you to realize its benefits. Forestry has been in the headwaters in a number of our waterways, including right there, the Boadouans River, the Vieux-Fort River, to mention a few, where they are going in and negotiating with the farmers. Now, just imagine your livelihood has been bananas and so on in that watershed, and forestry is asking you to put in forest species. So that is where the agroforestry projects are coming in. We're looking to plant cocoa, we're looking to plant zaboka and some of these other varieties. So over time, what we anticipate is going to happen, these fruit trees will become the dominant agricultural activity. It will provide the covering that is required. It will provide the carbon sequestration and all these things that we're looking for, while at the same time giving the farmer an opportunity for a livelihood and safeguarding our water resource.
Very good. In fact, that takes me to the next level in the sense that if we continue to produce, we have planned, and the way forward post-COVID, market is key. Dr. King, if we cannot control, like you said earlier, Kemwell, the production scheduling of some of the farmers, and they go there ad hocly producing. What happens with the excess? Are we looking for export market? I know, Dr. King, you've been on some committees, OECS. Tell us something about the possibility of exports.
Okay, so when COVID came around, I mean, it's unfortunate that we had to wait for COVID for this to happen.
It opened the eyes of
but
everybody.
a lot of things came into play,
Yeah.
a lot of things. And we had different committees being established. And one of those committees would have been that of OECS and that of CARICOM, and looking to see how we could foster regional trade, because we know in the future there's a possibility with borders being closed that it will affect our imports. So we now have to look to ourselves and our region to assist us in food and nutrition security. So we've formed a committee assessing each member state and seeing what is available and what is not available. We're looking at the troublesome areas, which is the movement of the products from one member state to the next, which is transportation issues. We were looking to see how we could get it as cost effective as possible. There are also the phytosanitary and the sanitary protocols because you want to foster trade, yes, but at the end of the day, you do not want to compromise agricultural health of any member state. So we need to know what our situation is and to have a harmonized approach to that. So in the event that St. Lucia overproduces a particular crop, there's a listener assessment that is placed on a grouping, more or less, and it gives you an idea of what is available in the different member states and what is in excess of and what is we have shortfalls in. So that will help with our communication to allow us to move forward. We have engaged Export St. Lucia, which is part of the committee as well, to help foster and facilitate that component of it. So we are looking at regional trade for food and nutrition security.
But I'm moving forward in the sense that if you're talking OECS, you have St. Vincent producing a lot of the sweet potatoes and the root crops. Is there a possibility moving forward that we can use the same avenues, the same transportation, like the bananas and the boats going to England, coming down the islands? So from St. Vincent, you get your root crops. From St. Lucia, you get whatever we can produce, and then you move, and then is that a possibility?
These are all up in the discussions as to the best way forward for us to move. And this, as you mentioned, has showed up its head in terms of how we could facilitate one boat moving from island to island to carry produce across. But one of the challenges we have, though, most of our climatic conditions are the same. We plant mostly the same crops
at the same time.
At the same time. So what we may need to look at now is specializing, maybe, which country is best at what, and probably promote. For example, St. Lucia, our bananas, maybe we need to push the bananas within the region, whereas somebody who's doing something else, like the melons or something, maybe may look into that. So these are things that we are still discussing and trying to iron out to see which is the best way forward for the region. I
think apart from the ecological conditions, you're looking at soil types too.
Soil types,
because soil types can play a role. In fact, I mean, we cannot produce carrots to that level to sustain us to be self-sufficient. However, there may be another island that's producing carrots, and they can also sell carrots to us. So we have to start thinking,
Yes.
And I think COVID has opened our eyes. Yes, there have been some negativities, but I think COVID really opened and raised eyebrows, and which I will come to in a while. So I think I will go to a break now because there's quite a lot we need to discuss as far as what COVID was able to do with when the country was, on shutdown. We've been talking about Eat Fresh Solutions Best to get people to eat local, and we've been telling that for years. My program for the past so many years have been saying so. And it's only when COVID hit and people had time to be at home, then I saw a friend of mine with a nursery, you would go there and you would see one vehicle, maybe a week. I mean, there were traffic jam because people now saw the need to plant, all right, and the backyards. Right now, people are, so I am seeing now maybe COVID did a good thing. It has helped people to be more creative in terms of the production. So I think we need to be on that trend, and I'm hoping that down the road, with your future planning from Extension, I think we should be able to meet our target, cut down our food import bill, which I will speak to in a while because I'm seeing some nice figures there, which I will share with the public. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.
What's in the food you're eating? Do you really even know? All the chemicals and hormones used to accelerate their growth. All the artificial flavoring, sweeteners and colors too. We consume and we don't spare a thought for the damage that they'll do. No, think about the children. Think about the children. How will we save them? Chemicals and GMOs are not the solution. Use organic and join.
Excessive agrochemical use, additives, and genetically modified foods are harmful to health and the environment. Join the good food revolution. Grow, buy, and consume organic. A message from Rise St. Lucia and the Ministry of Sustainable Development with funding from the GEF Small Grants Program, UNDP.
The good food revolution.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Agriculture on the Move, and we're discussing the effects of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector. I have an equal question from HTS, which is very interesting. Should St. Lucia use this opportunity to promote its agricultural sector in order to become more self-sufficient in food production? And the survey came back, 90% of St. Lucia said yes. And that takes me back to what I said earlier in terms of people now going into their backyard. And we're talking about the Eat Fresh St. Lucia's Best campaign. And look now, the Ministry of Commerce have also come on board with a buy local, and now they're looking for a suitable, tagline so that we can move on, because we have goods and services, for sale out there. Okay, so here it is. The poultry and the pork production section. How does this turn now moving forward? Because I was told that in the US, a lot of those processing plants were closed. What's going to happen with our imports? I was told that even chicken bags are coming in as it used to. So it has an opportunity for us to eat local, right? Tell us a little about this, Dr. King.
Okay, so because of, again, COVID-19, you had a lot of persons getting ill in the US, and a lot of the factories were shut down. So it would have caused a cut in production. I think there was, just today I was reading an article that a lot of animals were actually euthanized because they could not go through a processing line to process for human consumption. So this is very concerning. And I think also it's an opportunity for us, again, to look at our subsectors, our livestock subsector, and see how we may not be able to take on the imports, all of the imports, right? But to see how we could at least bring it a little, our percentage production could go a little higher than what it is now. The only challenge we have, though, is that most of our inputs are imported. So for example, the chicken, as much as we have the feed mill locally, We also, the inputs to produce the feed is imported. That's one. Two, the hatching eggs. The hatching eggs are imported. So if, for example, the U.S. decides that, the situation in the U.S. is very, very critical, and we're no longer going to export hatching eggs, we will be in a situation. So this has actually forced us to start looking to other markets, non-traditional markets, that would allow for, with the same sanitary conditions as St. Lucia, that we could allow the importation of such inputs. So as much as it is an opportunity, but there's still a lot of work that has to be done in terms of making the necessaries available to promote the production. Right now, I must say, for eggs, we are self-sufficient in eggs. Our table eggs, we don't import table eggs. Table eggs are only imported only if there's a situation on ground. Yeah? So that's one thing in our favor, that we could continue along those lines. But there's still a little bit of work that has to be done in terms of the poultry. In terms of the pork, yes, we may have the animals, but one of the major things that we really need to work on and to push forward is the establishment of the processing facility, the abattoir, as you well know, you know. And we are actually in the process of doing that. We have identified lands for the relocation of the abattoir, and the process have already started. So we're hoping to get that up and running as soon as possible. Yeah, so that it would facilitate not only to supply local persons with our local meats, but probably looking at exports of meats to the region as well. So COVID has, as much as it has a lot of negative implications, it has also opened up a lot of avenues that we should take advantage of.
Definitely. I'm just looking at our food import bill. For 2018, it was 367 million. 2019, it's a little over, probably about 373. But the interesting thing is, I'm not sure whether it was the intervention of the 7 crops, but 5 of the 7 crops, all right, were produced locally, and we did not. The importation of those crops were limited. So again, Kemuel, what do you have? I know the 7 crops project started last year, where you will give seeds to the farmers and etc. But then I'm wondering, was the 7 crops impacted on that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits of the project so far is the advocacy. We've been advocating in Fresh St. Lucia's best, and since we've been advocating so strongly about the opportunities that are being presented for local production, our farmers, and we need to say hats off to them again. With limited support, because we've been able to provide some ground cover, particularly for the fruit vines that we're talking about, the cantaloupes, honeydew, and watermelon. We've been able to provide some ground cover. We've also been able to provide some seed material. And of course, through the Moroccan project, we were able to provide fertilizers and so on. So when you bring all of these resources that have been made available and the strong advocacy from the department, it has motivated farmers to actually go out there and to be producing. And so it is one of the messages that we need to continue, one of the actions, that the areas that we seek to encourage local production and consumption, that we continue to advocate and have that message in the hearing of the farming community, so that they will step up and see the opportunities that are being presented. While COVID-19, we were on 24-hour lockdown and so on, it would amaze you that under the project we did start what was called farmers markets. And these farmers markets were by way of demonstration, and the communities went ahead and set up their own farmers markets. I mean, one person called me really excited from Mikud one day and said, "Boy, Kemuel, the farmers came around 5:30, 6 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, the place was cleaned up," and so on. And for those persons on social media, I'm sure in the north of the island, you would have seen some fancy-looking farmers markets with extras. But what the project has done through those farmers markets is to let the communities know that, look, you don't need to walk 10 miles or drive 5 miles to some central location. The people who are within proximity, the farmers who are in proximity, could come up, set up shop on specific days of the week or whatever the case. Once the community knows that there is an expected time and products are available, they will come in and they will purchase. What we now as a ministry need to do is to put mechanisms in place to monitor the quantities. Now, people usually think, think when we start monitoring stuff that is for tax or whatever, that's foolishness. We want to know what quantity of produce is going through those outlets. It will allow us to plan better. It will allow us to see opportunities, engage funding agencies to perhaps provide even better environments. Let me just single out one. There's a little farmers market. It's not at P.I. Salty Bus. Man, that place is like a massive store. And one of the reasons why they thrive so well, persons were not willing to take the long line to the supermarket. Right. So you could so now you are doing drive-in farmers market. You pass by, you shout for what you want, and you were able to get it. And so all of these developments really augured well during COVID-19, that the farmers market in particular was a real good opportunity. So the advocacy, the constant ringing in the ears, and even some folks are saying that the children now are eating a lot more of the local substrate because folks were at home and they were able to make different preparations.
That's right.
No one was rushing out the door to work, so they were able to come with pumpkin steaks and all kind of fancy foods. Yes. So it was an opportunity, and perhaps if we spend more time promoting and advocating that sort of interaction, it will all go well for us.
But COVID-19 also re-energized the market in Miku. You know, there's a market in the heart of Miku,
the middle of
which only operates on a Saturday.
Yes.
During COVID, every day it's open, and I think that began because of the
farmers
market that you all had at the field.
That's right.
You know, and again, as you said, you have a market right there within your locale. Without going far, without going to View 4 or driving to Fisheries to waste your gas.
Absolutely.
You know, currently we're going into the hurricane season. Yes, the dry season is there, but we're hearing. Okay, yes. What are you telling our farmers out there?
So according to one of my farmers, he says we are coming from a sunny hurricane, Hurricane Soleil, and we are going into storms. So we are just ending this dry period. We just want to encourage the farmers that there are a few things. Those persons who have greenhouses, you know the drill. Start getting ready to pay attention to what's happening in terms of the forecast and prepare for that. Those farmers in areas where drainage is a challenge, now is a good time to go in and organize your drainage, get the heavy equipment or whatever is required, set up your drainage adequately. Persons who are into livestock, ensure that your pens are secured and that sort of stuff. And get ready for the season. We don't know what it's going to be. In 2009, when we had an extended dry period, we ended up with 2010 Thomas that made a mess. And so this period has been extensive. We don't know what it's going to bring, whether wind or floods, but we are encouraging farmers to pay attention. One of the things that the field officers and of course the livestock officers are going to be doing during the month of June as a preparatory measure is what we call the pre-storm inventories. So you will see the communities will see the extension officers coming and paying attention to what is in the ground, because what we find out is post-disaster we have more crops and more acreage than the country itself can bear. So part of the story here is to do what we call a pre-storm inventory, so that when we actually, if God forbid we do have a disaster, we could use that information to guide us as to what the farmers were involved in, what they were expecting, and we could more adequately or more equitably appropriate the resources that we have to help with the recovery efforts. Definitely. In the case of a disaster.
Yes. We're just about to end the program. I know during COVID, we had a lot of our frontliners. I would like you to, at least tell them the appreciation that we have for them working so hard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sidney. Let me first of all thank the farmers and fishers, those persons in the agricultural sector, fishers who continue to go out to provide for us, the farmers who continue to produce, Agro Processors who continued along their business. Let me thank them first and foremost. Within the Department of Agriculture, the frontliners, Predia Lasney, cannot forget them. They were out there every single day, working hard in contact. Mr. Pancras and his team, hats out to you. Let me say thank you to the Water Resource Management Agency. They were there in the drought-related emergency, working on that, monitoring the rivers and streams. The people at Wasco doing the job at the dam and monitoring as well. But that's part of our ministry. Let me say thank you to all my heads of department, all the heads of department who have been there to provide the support. We gave passes, extension, chief extension. We gave passes to farmers and fishers, and allowing them to move within the curfew period and those passes and to move across zones as well. They were providing, livestock was providing support to the poultry industry and going out and troubleshooting in those areas.
Quarantine people.
The quarantine people, food kept coming in, the cargo kept coming in,
Yes.
and we had to ensure that there was a safe supply of food. At one time, I think there was a container for Nemo. I said, let the food come in, and they said, no, PS, you need to ensure that we don't have a crisis and the food is safe.
Yes.
So the quarantine people were always there. The persons who dealt with the exports of bananas to the UK and bananas to Barbados, the region. That came going out. We had inspectors and quarantine persons there as well. So let me say a big thank you to them for their support. I had the account staff in my department. They were there religiously to process payments for persons, to ensure that they got paid and to move matters and to procure materials. So these persons as well, propagation, I cannot forget them. They came out to water the seedlings and to ensure that we have planting material. So a lot of people at forestry to ensure that the forest is safe, the clearing and all of that doesn't take place.
And don't forget our information office.
Our information office. we have the PSAs going out, and the protocol guidelines for fishers and disseminating all that information.
Yeah.
We have a lot of persons, and I just want to thank the entire Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources and Cooperatives for their tremendous support during this period. Without you, we could not have done it. We have done a tremendous job for the fishers, farmers, and for the nation, ensuring that our mandate of food security is preserved. And as we said, in our assessments, we had 2 rapid assessments.
Yes.
We have enough food on the ground for the next 6 months, and we'll continue to do our job.
Yes.
The benefits that we receive under the COVID fund, I said to the farmers and fishers, it is your benefit, and we'll give you every cent of that benefit. Thank you.
Good. Final words from you, Doc?
Okay, what I just want to say, I want us to continue keeping ourselves safe, respecting our social distancing, wearing our mask, washing our hands, taking care of ourselves. But I also want us to realize that in the midst of COVID, there are other things that we have to look into. And we have the hurricane season coming up upon us as well. So our farmers, we're asking you to take heed, make sure you secure your pens, your produce, your feed, your inputs, do the necessaries to make sure that you remain secure during the hurricane season as well.
Kemuel?
In the words of my good friend in Babono, Sixtus out there, plenty we do for you, plenty. So I would like to encourage our farmers to continue along this line. Pay attention to where you're going to be selling it, who your buyers are. So if it is the street market, the supermarket, whichever market, pay attention, have those conversations in terms of what they could absorb so that you could plan your production and you could manage the production with a support from the Extension Advisory Services. We'll continue to provide guidelines in terms of the quantities that we perceive will be required, and hopefully Prime Minister and others will give us a nice heads up in terms of the time for the reopening of hotels and so on, so that we could prepare the produce that may be necessary in those areas. And of course, continue to stay safe, everybody.
Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. I want to thank you all. PS, thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. King. And I also want to thank you, Kemuel, for being here to at least let the public know where agriculture stands. Because I think they wanted to hear something from agriculture, right? So I'm very thankful for that. You've been watching Agriculture on the Move. I want you to remember that agriculture is our business. And remember, you need to eat fresh. St. Lucia is the best. In fact, that's the time to do it more now. Consume what we produce locally. It's better for your health, and the money stays here. Remember, stay safe. I'm Philip Sidney. Goodbye.